Hi everyone, and welcome back to Adrian's Digital Basement. On today's video, it's everyone's least favorite segment, Mail Call. Yeah, that's right. The performance of these videos is never so great, but it's still cool to make them because I like to show you guys the stuff that everyone sends me. All right, let's get right to it. Alright, so first to start off this video, it's going to be a two-parter. I've actually already edited the video and it has turned out to be about an hour long. So I think that's a bit too long for one video, especially this type of content. So I'll be splitting this up into two parts, but don't worry, I'll be releasing them very close to each other, just a few days apart. That way you don't have to wait a full week for this and we'll get back to regularly scheduled programming the following weekend. Speaking of editing, I actually picked up this laptop to do editing on. It's a Lenovo Flex 14. I saw this online as tech tips as a laptop that only cost a little bit over $500, and it's powerful enough to run DaVinci Resolve, which is the editing software I use, which I have a lot of problems with, by the way, but I do power through. But you need a pretty powerful machine, and this has a Ryzen 5 processor in it, 4 cores, 8 threads, 12 gigs of RAM with 10 gigs available to Windows, and a 256 gig SSD, and overall a very svelte build. This thing I am extremely impressed with. I only just got it. It's one of those convertible type laptops where you can flip it around and turn it into a tablet. It even comes with a pressure sensitive pen that you can use with the screen for taking notes and stuff like that. I normally use my desktop computer for editing, and it's more than powerful enough with 32 gigs of RAM and a fast video card to do what I need. But sometimes I need to edit while I'm on the road, and I have a ThinkPad X250 laptop that's been my laptop since I think around 2015, and I figured it would be fast enough to edit on, but nope, it absolutely wasn't. So when I saw this thing with a Ryzen processor and only just a little bit over $500, I jumped at my opportunity to get it. And I gotta say, I'm more than impressed with the build quality of a computer that is so cheap. On top of the things I've already mentioned, it has a fingerprint reader, a backlit keyboard, and even the touchpad is pretty good. It's a Microsoft Precision touchpad, so it supports all the regular Windows 10 gestures like switching desktops and dragging and shrinking and everything else, and it works really well. I don't have any complaints. It's not as good as a MacBook Pro, glass, huge trackpad, but for something on a laptop that costs this little, it works great. The cooling on this laptop is also really good. It's not annoying sounding, which is really important to me. If there's a high-pitched whine or any kind of annoyance, that sucks. It is able to handle the cooling of the processor maxed out on all 8 threads while rendering. And of course, since this is a Ryzen mobile processor in here, I think it's a 3500U, it has built-in Vega graphics, which are AMD Radeon graphics. Sure, it's slow for gaming, but a program like this actually uses the GPU for hardware acceleration, and which is definitely a leg up from my old ThinkPad, which was a Core i5 5th generation, but only an Intel iGPU with no accelerated graphics. From an I/O perspective, it's pretty good. It's got USB-C, HDMI, headphone jack there, and on this side, it's got 2 full-size USB 3 ports. Looks like it has an SD card slot, and then this is the power button. The one annoyance is it uses a DC barrel jack for charging, and it will not charge off USB Type-C. I've already tested that. But yeah, anyways, I know this is a little off topic for my channel, but if you're looking for a laptop that is pretty powerful and very easy to use, pretty light, very flexible, very utilitarian, and actually pretty good build quality. Yes, it's entirely plastic, but it's not all weak and wobbly. It's pretty good. It's very impressive. I recommend this, the Lenovo Flex 14. I'll put a link in the description below to the Amazon link. Oh, and there's something I forgot to mention. You can take the cover off and it has 1 RAM slot. So this thing is expandable, I think up to 20 gigabytes of RAM right now. It has 4 gigabytes soldered, and then it has an extra SIM slot, which currently has an 8 gig in there, which is how this thing has 12. Also, it has a regular NVMe SSD drive, so it's totally user upgradable to a much larger one if 256, which is what comes in here, is not good enough. All right, on to the actual mail call part of this video. I want to first start out and say thank you to Micah at the Commodore Club here in Vancouver, Washington, and Portland, Oregon. At our last meeting, he gave me 2 4-packs of this absolutely delicious ginger beer, Bundaberg from Australia. I had never had this stuff before, and man, is it tasty. It actually is made with wheat, among other things, but it's non-alcoholic, of course, but it's got a lot of ginger flavor, and it tastes absolutely phenomenal. Now, I am a type 1 diabetic. I have been for a long time, just like Techmoan, I might add. He's a type 1 as well. Anyways, so drinking sugary stuff like this is not something I really can do. I do need to stick to diet stuff. Luckily, I open this up if I have low blood sugar, and I'll drink it, and I'll take a little bit of extra insulin. So it means I'm savoring this. I don't drink it very quickly. Huge thanks to Micah for handing this to me. Good choice on the ginger beer. Oh, that is so good. It's so much ginger. It's almost zingy. Love it. Next up, before I start opening packages, I think some people might have noticed in my last video, a Macintosh G4 Cube sitting on my desk here. This actually was donated to me along with a second one from Cal, also from the Commodore Computer Club. He ended up buying a pallet of old computers from a recycling center, and on there was a bunch of these G4 Cubes. I'm not sure how many, but he asked me if I wanted anything, and I said, yeah, I wouldn't mind one of those G4 Cubes, so he ended up giving me 2 of them. Now that turned out to be a good thing, because of the 2 he gave me, one of the power supplies, which was this large thing right here, was dead. And then on one of the machines, the optical drive was completely dead. And on this one, the optical drive was not loading disks properly, but at least it read disks. So what I did is I hodgepodged the parts together to get one really nice, really clean machine. And I was able to fix the optical drive loading mechanism, a huge pain, I might add. I absolutely hate slot loading optical drives. But I ended up with one G4 Cube that is working well. The other one does work, actually. I ended up switching the hard drives around so I could get it configured with OS 9. It boots up, it works fine. But of course, like I said, the power supply that I got was not functional. In addition, with the G4 Cubes, is they don't have audio output built into the machine. You have to use an external set of speakers with a little USB DAC, which I have sitting right here. Actually works all the way from the boot sound on a Mac. So when you first turn it on, you hear that bong. When this is plugged in, you hear the audio through this. Now, it is just a normal DAC. Unfortunately, the speakers which were attached to this thing were those little circular spheroid speakers that are clear. All the speaker surrounds had completely rotted away on those, and it was disgusting. I looked around, did a little research. It didn't seem like I could buy new speakers. So I ended up just cutting the cables and tossing those in the trash. And what I did is I added 2 RCA cable jacks to this little DAC amplifier. And I have some small surround sound speakers. So if I plug this into the computer with those speakers, then the audio works perfectly. But he gave me one of these, and that enables the sound on this one machine. But for the other cube that has a bad optical drive, I don't have one of these either. So it essentially has no audio on it. I just happen to have an old keyboard from an iMac. It looks like one of the blue ones here. So this works well with this, but of course you could just use any USB keyboard since this thing is standard USB. In fact, I'm using a regular Microsoft optical mouse because that's all I have. Not to mention that puck mouse that Apple sold at the time of these. Such garbage. Such garbage. When I got these computers, one of them had OS 10 on it, one had OS 9 point something or other, but I had people's files and stuff on there, so I erased both of them. And I've gone ahead and installed OS 9.2.1 on both of them, because this seems to be, for me at least, the most optimal OS for these machines. OS 10 is kind of like the one we have now on modern Macs, so what's the point of running that? But this is the old classic Mac operating system, which has a Mac 68000 emulator on here, so you can run software designed for the older Macs on here as well. So thank you, Cal, for donating these to the channel, and this one I'm going to be keeping at home, and the other one that doesn't have a working power supply I actually took to my office, and I have it set up on a shelf behind me, so when I'm on conference calls, it looks pretty on the shelf next to some other cool retro computers. All right, so the first package is from Steven in Caledonia, New York. Thank you, Steven. Let's check this out. I already cut it open, but I haven't looked inside yet. So there's a letter and a little box. Let's check out the letter really quick. Hi, Adrian. Really like your channel. Stumbled across it by accident. Glad I did. Steve goes on to say that he loves repairing 64s as well, and that he finds them really hard to get now for a cheap price. And I do have to agree with you, Steve. I used to be able to buy like 3 64s, a couple disk drives from a seller on eBay, someone who was cleaning out their garage for $30, $40, $50. Now people are trying to sell one in unknown, untested condition for $100, $150. It's kind of crazy. Prices have really shot up. Steve goes on to say that he's noticed that my ZIF test board C64 has missing case badge and no LEDs, although he later saw the LED inside the case. He ended up sending me some stuff to fix up that machine, and also he sent me a C128 Servant ROM IC. I actually have no idea what the Servant ROM is, so I'm going to have to go look that up. But thank you very much for sending me this stuff. Let's take a look at what's inside the box here. So he sent me some new case LEDs. One is green and one is blue for the test machine. Thank you. He sent me some new stickers, and I think he says in the letter here that these are for the windows on EPROMs, and the little Commodore logo is really cute compared to the generic piece of tape that I am constantly using. And here's the Servant ROM. Again, I'll have to go look up what that is. Thank you. And there are the case badges for that machine. So here's the ZIF machine, and indeed Steve was right. As you see, the badges are missing entirely. And inside the computer, the power LED is connected and it just sits here on the board. I do leave it right here because that way I can tell if the machine is on or not just from a quick glance. If this is removed and the case is off, you know, you might have the power on and I might pull a chip out of it. So that's sort of the reason why this is sitting here. Unfortunately, this is the original power LED from one of these old machines, and it's so dim. Look, when I turn the computer on, it's on, but you can barely see that that thing is lit up. So Steve, using one of your LEDs is probably going to be great because it's going to be much brighter. Let's plug one in and see. Oh, yeah. That is like a beaconing light. Look how bright that is. I'll have a much harder time missing that the machine is on and accidentally pull a chip out. And the other one is a very deep, deep blue LED. Nice. Thank you very much. Now, there's a reason why there's missing case badges on this machine. It's because this case is pretty crappy. Notice how yellowed the case is. Someone had the little template there. So this thing is pretty ugly to look at. But worse yet, on the side, there's some permanent marker. And over here on this side, there's a hole drilled, probably for an old toggle switch. And overall, it's just in rough shape. So when I was working on this project, I needed a donor 64 to take the case badge off of. This is a VIC-20 case that has a Commodore 64 in it with a 64C light keyboard. A lot like the Aldi C64 sold in Europe, something like this was never sold in the US. So when it was time to pillage some C64 logos from somewhere else, I decided to take them off this case, which is why it looks a bit neutered. But since Steve sent me these case badges, I think it's time to try to clean this 64 up a little bit. Maybe I'll try to get the writing off the side. I'll do a retro bright on it, and I'll reinstall the case badges and a case LED. So I found a PDF manual for this Servant ROM, and it's still not exactly clear to me what the hell this thing even does. It does say it's not free software, all caps. Servant is shareware. Here it is, a ROM-based utility package designed for the Commodore 128. Welcome to the Servant. The guys who designed the Commodore 128 did a great job. Both you and I have enjoyed the fruits of their efforts. But in this design of the C128, they included a feature which has only rarely been put to use. If you open your trusty computer, there seems to be something missing. Oh yeah, there's an empty socket on the motherboard. This is where the Servant comes in. The Servant offers a plethora of nifty utilities and convenience features designed to make your computing life easier and more fun. This goes even if you never use the 128 mode at all. The Servant is designed with maximum convenience, compatibility, and security in mind. Yeah, you want to stay away from that Commodore 128 malware. Stuff's pretty bad. Those viruses, they're horrible. It seems like the Servant ROM just makes the 128 a little bit better to use. Like, it doesn't try to auto boot when you first power it on. I guess you can quickly run the first program on a disk. There's enhanced DOS commands, switching between 40 and 80 column screens, all sorts of disk utilities like a disk report, disk copier, file copier, scratch files, unscratch files. Anyway, I think looking at this is a little beyond the scope of the mail call video, so I'm going to have to move on and look at this later. So thank you very much, Steve, for thinking about my crappy old 64 machine and sending this stuff over to me. All right, the next mail call package from Tawny and Sean in Tucson, Arizona. And we have a letter. It says, laptop won't turn on. Power supply is definitely providing 19.5 volts according to Multimeter. Feel free to double check. Tried removing the battery, holding the power slider for 58 seconds won't work. As far as I know, the laptop hasn't been powered on in over a decade. Sean hit me up on email and he sent me an old laptop. Now, this is not super old. It's something I think from the late 90s. All right. It's an old Sony Vaio laptop and has very sticky feet. I'm going to stick some tape over those so it doesn't dirty up my desk. So a Vaio laptop, and I think this is a Pentium era machine. Yeah, it says Windows 95 and Pentium MMX. I kind of love this era of laptops, specifically because these run DOS really well. And often they have Sound Blaster support built in. You can actually run it directly in DOS with Sound Blaster. Checking out the ports, you have a serial port, PS2, VGA, very handy. There's the DC in, looks like it has an IR blaster, one USB port and one parallel port. Probably some type of expansion connector under this middle thing here. Oh, look at this fanciness. Little swivel feet. There's one on each side. So when you're computing, you can have a nicer angle. There's also a CD-ROM drive, two PCMCIA slots, probably the hard drive bay, and the battery compartment. So there is no floppy drive on this particular computer. These machines can be super handy if you're trying to run a DOS or Windows 95 or 98 program that doesn't work on newer machines and you need, say, serial port or parallel ports to plug into some type of external accessory. Something like this that's small and portable is just easier than lugging out a large machine you have to plug an external monitor and keyboard into. And that's kind of why I like this vintage of laptop. I have a slightly older and definitely a slightly bulkier Toshiba satellite laptop. They're similar-ish vintage in that this is also a Pentium MMX processor. It does have a working Sound Blaster. But the issue with this Toshiba is it has an absolutely horrible passive matrix screen. Let me do a quick check of the voltage. I know Sean said he already checked it, but you never know. Let me just do it myself. Yep, 19.8 volts. So the power supply is definitely setting the correct voltage. All right, let me connect it and see if there's any sign of any kind of life whatsoever. We have power LEDs here, and plugging it in absolutely does nothing. So I'll have to open this thing up, take a look inside, see if we can see anything that's obviously wrong. First thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to try to take all the accessories out. So here's the battery, here's the hard drive. Both of these just came out of the side super easily. CD-ROM drive is also removable. This probably had the capability to have a floppy drive in it as well. All right, cool, RAM, easily serviceable. All right, in typical Sony fashion, to take the cover off, every single little screw that you need to remove has a little arrow next to it. Oh, that's a long screw. Ooh. There must have been some kind of docking station because there are these two holes here. Maybe this cover comes off and there's a connector and you slide this into some type of docking station and it aligns it with these holes. I'm just quickly looking over the sides, looking for any other screws that might be hiding. But look, this is already coming apart, so I think I might have it all. Now I see there are two little covers here. These might need to pop out. Okay, the lower panel comes off separately. So this was the original battery that I took out, was on this side, but you can actually take the optical bay out, and there's another battery connector here, so you can have dual batteries on this thing. Aha, you knew it. Seems to slide down. Let's see if this top cover comes off now somehow. All right. There we go. So the keyboard is connected here, and I think these have to be lifted up, these connectors. They do. Yeah, once it goes up, then you can pull the keyboard cable out like that. I'll need to do the same on this other one. It's a bit of a tight fit in here. So what I'm curious about is there's a battery right here. It's a Varta battery, and I wonder if this being dead prevents the computer from working. I've actually had that happen before. This right here is likely the screen connector, and it looks like you have to take this off to get the battery out. There's the screen connector. This is there's a modem phone jack here. Move that out of the way. Well, there's a battery, 7.2 volts, 30 milliamp hours, nickel metal hydride. So rechargeable and could leak and destroy everything, but it hasn't. So I'm curious that with the screen disconnected, the battery out, the keyboard disconnected, what will happen when I plug the power in now? Oh, look at that. Power LEDs have turned on. Let's turn this off, and I'm going to pull the power and reconnect the screen. And let's turn it on. What happens? Look at that. We still have power LEDs. Ooh, a little sound. There it is, Sony. Okay, it started up. I can see the screen, but you can't in this camera, and that's because this appears to be a passive matrix screen. Darn it. I was really hoping for active matrix. Okay, well, at least we can see what's going on with the laptop. We have a Pentium MMX 266. Looks like we have 32 megs of RAM, So the computer's back together a little bit. I have the monitor cable screwed in and keyboard is reconnected. The hard drive is back in. Everything is just loosely sitting here, but let's see what happens when I try to turn it on now. Sorry for the glare on the screen. That's about as good as I can get it. So it's seeing the hard drive. It's an IBM drive. Push F2. All right, that's working. Oh yeah, that's that passive matrix screen. Oh, I think people have sort of forgotten how horrible they are. When you look straight on, let me try turning the computer towards the camera. Consistent or even? I don't know the right word. The way it looks in the camera is pretty much how it looks to me as well. It's just a really horrible, horrible LCD screen. So LCD brightness, it's set to 9. And I guess that's as bright as it's gonna get. I used to have a Sony Vaio back in that day, and that little doo-doo-doo-doo sound it makes when you turn it on. Oh, that brings back a lot of memories. Lilo boots. That means this has got Linux on it. Oh, look at that. This was before Grub, Lilo. So before I completely took this apart, I probably should have tested to see if it was working when the CD-ROM drive was removed. Because realistically, at this point, either the battery was causing the no start or the CD-ROM drive. So let's put the CD-ROM back in, see if it boots up with that in there. Okay, let's see what happens when I try now. Yeah, it's still powering on. So I really think that this battery was what was causing the no start condition. I'll put this machine back together, but I've actually cut the battery cable off and I've reconnected it to the motherboard, left it in there, and I wrote 7.2 volts nickel metal hydride inside the little battery tray there. That way I know not just to hook up, say, 2 coin cells to that, at least not with a diode. So I'm just going to leave this out so there's no potential of this leaking and put this machine back together. Setting up Windows 98, and oh boy, another horrible thing on these old laptops. Look at that scaling. When you don't have the resolution set just right for the LCD panel, you get an absolute horrible kind of lines all around the letters and stuff like that. And here you see how wonderful this screen is. Oh yeah, passive matrix. This is kind of what we had in the old days. Active matrix screens were just so expensive, and that's why we have cursor trails these days, because the mouse pointer would disappear to some extent if you moved it quickly. All right, time for a mini review. So the Sony Vaio is on the left and the Toshiba satellite I already had is on the right. Both of these machines are very similar era, although this Toshiba is probably slightly older. I think it's maybe got a 133 Pentium MMX processor. This has a 266 processor, so it's a little bit newer. From a form factor standpoint, the Sony laptop is a bit thinner than the Toshiba. It has a track pad versus a track point. I prefer track pads, but the thinness comes with the cost. The Toshiba has a CD-ROM drive and a floppy drive. They're both on the side here, while the Sony only has a floppy drive built in. Both have utterly terrible passive matrix screens, although the Sony one seems a little bit brighter, and both of these are maxed out right now. They are both equally ghosted and horrible though. Setting up Windows 98 from scratch on both computers is a bit easier on the Toshiba because everything just worked out of the box. I didn't have to install any drivers. On the Sony, the graphics driver is not working currently, although everything else looks like it is working. The sound is working. From a sound standpoint, the Toshiba is actually better. It's got a Sound Blaster 16 built in. It's fully DOS compatible in every way. Has a volume knob on the side with the audio ins and out right here as well. Super convenient to use, and you have full OPL3 stereo ad-lib sound compatibility with this machine. While the Sony seems to have an ESS audio solution, it's probably Sound Blaster compatible, probably works in DOS, but I don't know, and I haven't tested this, if the audio for the FM synthesis works as well. Maybe it's wavetable or something weird like that. It does have 3 audio jacks on the side, but the volume control is software controlled, and almost certainly that does not work in DOS. Both machines have a CPU fan, and the Sony's is quite loud. In the BIOS, I changed it to silent mode, and now it's running but very slowly, and it's not annoying at all. In fact, I just hear the hard drive at this point. Now, unfortunately, both of these have dead CMOS batteries, so when you power them on, they just get the default settings in the BIOS. The performance mode is engaged on the Sony, which means the fan will be very noisy unless you go in and shut the fan up. Something else that's not good on the Sony is the scaling. So currently you're at 640 by 480. This panel is probably 1024 by 768, but as you can see, it's looking mostly full screen, but the scaling is really bad quality. The Toshiba, on the other hand, doesn't really try to scale the graphics modes to fit the LCD. DOS does take up most of the full screen, like 320 by 240, but it's using a scaling mode that has a nice 2 by 2 pixels, so it's not blocky looking at all. This one, on the other hand, text mode in DOS and all the graphics modes look pretty terrible, and I looked through the BIOS and there's no option to even turn off the scaling altogether. So essentially, unless you're running at the native panel resolution, this one is just not good for DOS. You can also plug VGA into both of these, of course, and bypass these terrible screens, but it's nice to be able to play something on the internal screen. Both of these computers run off a typical 19 volts or so, but the Sony uses a power connector jack that's a little bit weird. It's got a little center pin on the inside as opposed to just a standard DC barrel jack. This just uses a standard DC barrel jack, so I'm actually not even using an original power supply, but some Targus clone one that I found in a box somewhere. So that means if you find these computers, you're more likely to find a compatible power supply for the Toshiba, and the Sony, you're going to need a power supply that's either designed for it or has the right connector on the end. Both of these machines seem to work perfectly without the battery, and it is nice that they have a battery cover so you don't just have a big gap in the bottom of the computer. And yet, other than being lighter, you don't notice that the battery is missing. Both of these machines have a very easily removable hard drive as well, so if you want to take the hard drive out so you can plug it into a modern computer to copy programs onto it using a USB adapter, it's pretty trivial on both of these. So since both of these machines are pretty similar, which would I prefer to use? I'd probably go with the Toshiba, just specifically because it has a floppy drive, so it's much easier to get a couple files on and off. Both of these machines also have a single USB port on the back. It's USB 1.1, but at least when you install the right extensions with Windows 98, you can use it with thumb drives, which makes getting files on and off the machine a lot easier than if it didn't have a USB port. So thank you very much to viewer Sean for sending me this DOS-compatible laptop. Does mean that I'm still on the hunt though for one that's a similar vintage to this with full DOS, Sound Blaster compatibility, and Active Matrix LCD screen, something that's not so bad as this and the Toshiba laptop I have. All right, we have another package. This one's from Michael in Reno, Nevada. We have some hard drive or floppy cables. These are her hard drive, MFM. Got the smaller one and the larger one. Michael has sent me an Adaptec ISA 8-bit hard drive controller. What makes this one special compared to most of these is, yes, it has the same 3 connections. It looks like an MFM hard drive controller, but this is actually an RLL hard drive controller. And I will soon have a video coming out about RLL hard drive controllers. So we're going to save this for that. You'll see this again in that video. Thank you very much, Michael, for sending this my direction. All right, next up, we have something from Amazon.com. We have a note. It says, I hope you find these useful. I use them to help preventing damage when prying cases or scraping sticky from plastic. I really enjoy your videos and hope you continue making more. From Jeffrey Duncan in Austin, Texas. Don't know why I don't have my cutting board out. All right, let's take a look at what Jeffrey has sent my way. It's like a little tool set here. Oh, very nice. Really nice. Jeffrey has sent me one of these little toolkits with various pry tools for opening up computers or electronics or whatever it is with minimal damage. Specifically, I think what he was sending me were these plastic pry tools. So we have this one right here, which has a little sharp edge there, and it has a little screwdriver tip on that side. Of course, it's flexible. This one here is plastic as well, sort of has the consistency of a plastic utensil. Then we have this one, which is sort of like a flat blade here, but more sharp pick on that one. Same thing there. There's just 2 of the same tools. And we have another little pry tool, again with a little sharp edge, good for kind of prying into something, one on both sides. This one is definitely more stiff. And we have this tool, which looks like tweezers. When I pop this off, oh, it's a very nice sharp set of tweezers. Awesome. And then we have a metal little pry tool here, similar to these, but a metal version. And we have one of these stainless steel pry tools, I think also typically called the eye opener. I actually have a few of these because I find these quite useful for getting into things that I don't quite care so much about, scratching up. Although this is quite thin on this side, and you can also get in there and pry things open, try to get clips off. It can cause damage to plastic stuff. I had previously bought some of these stainless steel ones here from AliExpress. Just says Unlimited Innovation, the opening tool. This one's one of these is a little bit worse for wear. I think I've pried something a few too many times, and it's supposed to be spring steel or something that doesn't bend permanently, but I've actually damaged these. So you can never have enough of these types of tools. So that's very thoughtful of you, Jeffrey. Thank you so much for sending these my way. You'll definitely be seeing these in future videos. All right, I'm going to end part 1 right there. And don't worry, part 2 will be up in just a couple days. I've already done all the editing, so it's just a matter of me spacing out when I put the videos public. So stay tuned for that. If you like this video, I'd appreciate a thumbs up. If you didn't know what to do, you can hit the thumbs down. I'd love to hear your comments and your suggestions in the comment section below. And of course, you can subscribe for more videos. There'll be lots more in the future, so hit that little bell icon if you want to be notified. All right then, thank you very much for watching. Have a good night, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.